and it is recording now.
All right. Hey, everyone. It's so awesome to see so many of you joining us tonight. Welcome to the LeadUpTeach Blab with myself, Elizabeth Bostwick, and my co-host, Heidi Veal. I'm a teacher in the Finger Lakes region of New York, and I'm driven to lead PBL, Makerspace, and EdTech to enhance learning. Tonight on Blab, we're super excited to welcome Todd Nesloney, who's a principal, White House Champion of Change, and the co-founder and author of Kids Deserve It. Tonight, not only are we excited to have Todd joining us, but we also want to give a shout out to Laura Gilchrist, who's hosting our first LeadUpTeach Twitter chat. Feel free to follow the conversation on the Twitter chat. That'll also be on Kids Deserve It, and also listen in here in the Blab. And just before we get started, Heidi, please just take a moment to introduce yourself.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining LeadUpTeach tonight here on Blab. And my name is Heidi Veal, and I'm an assistant principal in McKinney, Texas at Lawson Early Childhood School. And along with Liz, we co-founded LeadUpTeach, and Laura Gilchrist has joined us as a valued partner and thought partner also with LeadUpTeach, and she is going to be hosting the Twitter chat on Twitter tonight also. I also co-founded and helped co-moderate ECE chat for early childhood educators. That's a Tuesday night chat, and I'm passionate about leadership, ed tech, early education, coaching, special education, all things education and leadership. So we are so excited for our 6th episode tonight of LeadUpTeach, and so pumped to welcome you, Todd.
Thank you.
So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Todd Nesloney. I am an elementary principal in Navasota, Texas, which is about an hour west of Houston. I just finished my 2nd year as principal and entering my 3rd, and super excited. I'm also the co-founder and co-author of Kids Deserve It and the Kids Deserve It movement. So
Awesome. Well, welcome, Todd. And we also want to give a special welcome to our LeadUpTeach audience, both here on Blab and on Twitter. And we invite everyone to use the hashtag of LeadUpTeach to connect and share out on social media, both during and after the Blab.
Great. And on our episode tonight, we're going to hear about Todd, about your journey as an inspiring and influential educational leader.
Yeah, just to get us started, Todd, would you mind just sharing about your journey that led you to the inspiring educator that you are today?
yeah, sure. So I knew that I wanted to be a teacher from a young age, probably when I was a freshman in high school. I loved working with kids, so I knew I wanted to do some kind of thing working with kids. At first, I thought, I really wanted to be in social work. I did a lot of work with my church in the youth group, and as well as with children's camps and things like that, and I really wanted to do that. And then I realized that social work was not for me because it's hard for me to disconnect myself emotionally sometimes. And so I knew that social work was not where I was meant to be. So I went into teaching. I worked as an instructional aide for 4 years while I went to college, then went straight and got a job. I loved it, was taught for 7 years in the classroom, loved every minute of it. And then one day, about halfway through my 7th year in the classroom, I got a Twitter direct message that said, "Hey, do you like teaching project-based learning?" And I said, "Of course, that's what I do in my classroom. Why would I do it if I didn't like it?" And the message said, "Would you like teaching at a school where everyone's doing it?" And I said, "I'm not really interested. I love where I'm at. And if everybody's doing it, you're probably making them all. So it's probably not a very good deal." And then he said, "Well, how would you like to lead a school where everybody's doing that?" And I was like, "No, thank you. I like my job now. I like being in the classroom. I don't want to leave the classroom." Now, I already had my administrative degree and my master's, mainly because I wanted to be the first person in my family with a master's. But then he said, "Well, what if you got to hire your entire staff?" And I said, "Okay, I'll listen. I'll at least entertain the conversation now." Because it's kind of a dream job for educators, is to go and to kind of start your own school kind of thing. And so I went and spoke to the district and did the whole formal interview process and asked a lot of really hard questions. And I brought one of my friends with me during our first meeting because I was like, you have to make sure that I ask the hard stuff. Fell in love with their vision. I got hired on as the principal to kind of help restructure and redo a campus of theirs that was underperforming. Got to hire everybody from my assistant principal all the way down. We had a great first year. And then I've just finished my second year now as principal. We did some more restructuring in between my first and second year, and we restructured the campuses where they were pre-K 5. So I went from a 4-5 principal to become a pre-K 5 principal. And I got a lot more students this year because of the restructuring. So I ended up with about 750. But I absolutely love where I work. I work in a school that's about 90% free and reduced lunch, and it is about 85% minority. And so that's kind of the environment that I really love to be in, is with the students that come from those kind of backgrounds and working with them. And so I'm having a blast. And it's completely exhausting, but I love getting up every day. So it's totally worth it.
That's awesome.
That's so inspiring. Love hearing your story, Todd.
Thank you.
Share with us a little bit about Kids Deserve It, because that's really come on strong this past year, and just kind of the evolution of it and the book and all things kids deserve it.
It's such a unique story. It's funny. I feel like my life is full of unique stories, with my move into administration straight out of the classroom, and then with the Kids Deserve It stuff. So I had met a guy named Adam Welcome on social media. He was a principal in California, and I'd had him on my podcast show at that time, which was As You All Stars, and he was doing some great things. And I knew that he was going to the National Principal Conference that summer in Long Beach. I was going there as well, so I thought, hey, we can meet up finally. So we met up, we hit it off right away, and we went to the opening keynote at NAESP, which is the National Elementary School Principal Conference. And the keynoter was Eric Wall, who is a graffiti artist. And he is probably one of the best keynotes I've ever heard. Just talked a lot about inspiring creativity and that childlike wonder and all these other things. It was just really, really powerful. And when we left the keynote, Adam was giving me a really hard time because he's like an addicted to blogging. I mean, he will blog 3 to 5 times a week. And I blog like once a week, once every other week until like this week. But Adam was like, you know what? I said, I want to get you blogging more. Let's write a blog together. And I said, great, let's sit down and write a blog together. Well, 15 minutes later, we had this whole blog post written that was kind of a wrap up of the NAESP. And we both looked at each other and was like, that was really easy to do, just to write with each other. And we found we were just totally on the same page with things. And Adam was like, I really want to take our thoughts and combine them and kind of create something from that. And I said, I would love to do that too. Because we just work so well together. And he said, he said, both of our things is all about eliminating excuses, pushing people outside their comfort zones, and doing what's best for kids. And he's like, well, we need a tagline. We need to think of something that we can run with. And he said, what about Kids Deserve It? He said, if we use Kids Deserve It behind everything that we say, nobody can argue with the ideas unless they can prove that it's not something that kids deserve. He was like, so we can take that and totally do this whole idea with it. And I said, you know what? You're totally right. So that day after NASP, we created the hashtag. And we started tweeting with it and using it. And then we created a Twitter account, a Facebook page, a website, and we started blogging on there, just pushing some thought processes and things like that. And that's when Dave Burgess, author of Teach Like a Pirate, reached out to us and was like, hey, I love some of the stuff you're putting out there. Have you ever considered writing a book? And Dave had asked me before if I would consider writing a book. And it was just not anything that I thought I was capable of doing, especially on my own. And so I said, you know what? I said, maybe we could, Adam and I write really well together, and it's really easy. And so we turned in a couple of sample chapters. Dave loved what he saw and offered us a book deal. And then less than a year later, Kids Deserve It, the book, was out and on shelves. And it's officially been out for 1 month and 14 days. So it's super exciting. We got our first month numbers in on Saturday, and we were very pleased. It was far outside our expectations. But it's so crazy to look at a year ago. I had just met Adam for the first time. We had only met through social media, and then Adam and I have only hung out like 4 times in real life. Now, I will call Adam out on here and say all 4 times I have flown to California and hung out with Adam. He has come to Texas 0 times, just to point that out. I keep putting pressure on him. He's gonna come. But our wives get along.
The gauntlet.
That's right. I FaceTime with his kids all the time and Vox with them. And so it's just been a really neat partnership, and one that is 100% proof of the power of just connecting online and putting yourself out there and sharing your story and finding like-minded individuals. And the fact that two guys who met less than a year ago could write a complete book together through Google Docs and Google Hangouts and things like that. And now we have the website, we have a podcast show, we've got the hashtag, and the hashtag is just blown up. And it's just so much fun to go on the Twitter stream and kind of see things people are talking about. And now there's a couple of book studies on Facebook and Voxer and Twitter of different organizations. And it's neat. I'm in the Voxer groups and I just sit there and go, I can't believe somebody is actually reading what I wrote. It was neat to hold the book in my hand for the first time and think, oh my God, this is my book. But it's one of those things that's like, I can't believe that other people actually are reading what I wrote, especially when Adam and I tried really hard to be transparent and honest in the book. And so when some people are like, oh my gosh, this story was so powerful, and I'm like, oh my gosh, did I really share that? Did I really put my whole personal life out there for everybody to read about? So there's things like that, but it's just been really, really a roller coaster ride and such a great experience, and just a lot of really awesome support.
Well, I think that Kids Deserve It, the book, is one that so many can relate to. And I love that you're transparent in it, because I think that's what allows everybody to really embrace everything. And I just love everything that Kids Deserve It stands for. And I think you and Meta make a brilliant team.
Thank you.
So in talking about Kids Deserve It, we know Kids Deserve It is all about pushing boundaries and challenging conventional thinking. And so from your perspective, why is it imperative at this time in education? And ultimately, what impact do you wish to have on education at large?
Well, I look at every other thing in our country and in our world right now. Everybody's pushing the boundaries. Everybody's trying to do the next best thing. And you look at all these companies that are taking off. I mean, one example is just this Pokemon Go game that came out a week ago, and it has just taken the world by storm, with just this very simplistic game of just catching things on your phone, and everybody's addicted to it. And then I look at so often our educational world, and it's like, I still get frustrated when I walk into a school and there's still rows of desks. And I'm like, what the heck? Why are we not being the innovative force? We have kids in our classrooms. I mean, they are brilliant-minded children who don't believe in limitations except the ones we place on them. And yet we're letting other people innovate when we could totally be setting that standard ourselves. I saw a really powerful image at the Model Schools Conference that I was at in Orlando. And, I've seen that image before. And you probably may have seen it too in sessions where they show a picture of a school from like 1950, and it's got all the desks in rows. And they show a picture of a school from like 2015, and the desks are still in rows. And it's like, what has really changed? But then what she did is underneath that, she put a picture of a doctor's office in 1970, and it had all the equipment, and then the same kind of doctor's office, but in 2015. And to see how much has changed in that amount of time, it's like, why are these places changing, but we're not? And so I look at that like, we don't have the time to waste. We have to push ourselves. And we have a lot of things, as all of you know, being educators, that are fighting against us, and that make it difficult for us to innovate and difficult for us to push boundaries when we have a lot of other legal things that we have to complete, and testing and all these other things that are just part of the system. But then I think about, everybody else who's innovating, they have things standing in their way too. And they're not sitting there saying, oh, we can't do this, or this person did this. No, they're innovating regardless and finding great success. So I feel like it's our responsibility to do the same.
Todd, that reminds me of something that Kuros talked about. George did in combination with his new book, Innovator's Mindset. He talked about innovate inside the box. We all have a box that we have to live inside. There is this compliance piece that we as educators in public schools, it exists, period. But someone out there has the same constraints we do and is innovating inside of that same box. Why aren't we? You know what I mean? Like, I take that very personally. Like, it's like a challenge for myself. I've got to innovate inside the box that I've been given to provide better and more for my own students. Yeah. So our next question is this. Chapter 15 in Kids Deserve It really, really spoke to me. Like, that's probably one of my favorite chapters. And it was, I wish you knew. I loved reading the comments from the kids, from the teachers, from the administrators, from the parents. It shares responses from all of those different people to that one important question. What do you wish more people knew about you or your role? So Todd, tell us your answer to that question. What do you wish more people knew, either about you or about your role for our audience?
This question. You were like the third person this week to ask me this, because in the two of the Voxer groups that I'm in, they're talking about this group. They're on the same chapter. And I'm like, it's so uncomfortable for me to talk about these things. But but that is one of my favorite chapters as well. Not my favorite, but it is in my top 5. And just because, like, just what you said, it's powerful to hear the responses. And putting that together was such a fun experience for me, because I tried to get opinions from people from all over the country and sometimes from other countries, to really give and I feel like when you read it, it is a really true reflection of, like, I read it and I go, okay, I can see that. That makes perfect sense. I didn't see it from that perspective, but I get what they're saying there. And I think about me as an administrator now, and what I said during my first year of being a principal, I said, I wish I could go back to my former principals and tell them I'm sorry, and to tell them that I wish I would have been much more of a constant encouragement for them. Because for me, one of the hardest things about being a principal is, and I do not want this to come off like I'm complaining or woe is me. So don't take it like that at all. But one of the hardest things for me as a principal is just that you have your assistant principals and your administrative team to lean on, and your staff, and you're like a family at your school. But in the end, it comes down to you, and there's decisions you have to make and things you have to deal with that a lot of people don't know about and that you can't tell others about. But it's also that one job where every single day somebody is coming to you to tell you that you are not doing a good job, or that you are doing something wrong, or something they would like to see changed, or you need to fix this, or you need to do that. And there's so many wonderful things happening too. And that's the reason I love being an elementary school principal, because on any bad day, I can walk into a kindergarten classroom, sit down with 5-year-olds, and I'm the coolest kid in the room. And then I'm like, I love it here. But for me, I think, the thing my staff, we did a I wish you knew activity, and I tried to get out of answering this question, but I'll tell you the same thing I told them. One thing that I guess I wish my staff knew and understood about me was that I often feel like I am not doing a very good job at my role, regardless of the success I'm finding or the great things that are happening. Every day, it's like I feel like I could be doing better. And I know that's part of me just being extremely hard on myself. But that's one of my idiosyncrasies is trying not to get down on myself for the work that I feel like I'm not doing, and instead continually focus on the work that I am doing that is good and is what it's supposed to be.
I can definitely see how that would be like that. And I think that's why, even as a teacher, I truly believe in that collaborative leadership and always supporting what my principal is trying to also do and working on that shared vision, because I think we all need to be there to support each other. A friend of mine, Brandon Blom, who is a principal in California, and he and I recently wrote a blog post. We wrote a blog post to NASP this year for 10 tips for new principals. And then after we wrote it, a teacher had tweeted us and was like, I love this post. In what ways can I support my principal as a teacher? And Brandon and I both sat there and go, let's write something like that. And so, we just released a post on both of our blogs called 10 Ways That Teachers Can Support Their Principal. And it's just like what you were just saying, sometimes we just need to hear that we're doing a good job. Sometimes we just need you to go share the story of our greatness of our school or these things like this. And it's not because that's your job kind of thing. It's just like, these are ways you can support your principal, and they're not necessarily going to come out and tell you this is how you can support, but here's some ideas. Right. I agree. Well, and in thinking of just being in education and all it is that we're trying to do, principal, teachers, in any role that we work in, I truly think it's just an awesome time to be in education. There's so many amazing things going on in our schools, from PBL, Makerspace, all that's going on with passion projects. And there's just amazing things happening in our schools. However, we all know that change isn't always embraced, just as you were talking about with the desks and rows. And what tips could you provide to educators who are looking to do what's best for students, but that their ideas aren't embraced within their school? And it might be from their principal, but it might also be from their colleagues, because that happens too.
Well, sometimes when you're a boundary pusher or when you're an innovator, you're going to get that negativity. And those people who say, I used to get the comment of, can you stop doing that kind of stuff, because people are going to like it and then we're going to have to do it and we don't want to do it. And there's several ways that I look at getting around that kind of negativity. First of all, don't surround yourself with those people. When you find those negative people, find ways to not be around them. Now, if it's your team, obviously you're going to have to figure out ways to work with them. But I use the voices of my kids as much as possible, because it's one thing to tell me my idea is terrible, but when you have kids that love something and you have them speaking for you, it's much harder to tell an 8-year-old that that's a dumb idea to do in the classroom, when they can show you like, hey, can you try doing this? I can show you this, and this, and we can create this, and then I can read this book and I can do that. And when the kids are that excited, I don't want to be that adult that tells them, sorry, I don't feel like putting in that extra work to make that happen, so go sit down. Excuse me. So I use my kids' voices as much as possible. The other thing is sometimes you just got to close your door and go in your own space. I know that when there were days that I felt like nobody liked the ideas that I was doing, or I felt like I was just surrounded by negativity, that's when I just closed the doors and surround myself with my kids, because I loved my kids. I loved spending time with them. And then just that. There's a lot of different things that you got to do, but you got to stay focused. And the way I look at it is now, as an administrator, when I try to do creative things, or when I try to push people outside their comfort zones and they say, I don't want to do that, or I don't think that's a good idea, my response is, tell me how it's not best for kids and we won't do it, or I'll let you out of doing it. If you can explain to me that it's not best for kids because of this, this, and this, then great. You don't have to do it and I'll stop doing it. Because if they can truly explain that, I don't want to be doing it. But if you can't tell me why it's not best for kids, then you know what? Suck it up. We're going to make it happen. Because especially with elementary, the one thing I always tell teachers is with elementary kiddos, one wasted year in their elementary education equals out to 3. And so I am not going to be wasting 3 years of my kids' lives because I was uncomfortable doing this, or I knew that was going to require extra work or whatever.
Those are great tips, Todd.
They truly are great tips. And you know what? I just want to put all of that right there on just a graphic and hang it in every school, because that's what needs to be there. Love it.
Awesome. So kind of shifting a little bit, Todd, we know that you are an avid reader and you're passionate about literacy and building a culture of literacy for students and in your school. Tell us what you're reading right now and what is something that your staff will be reading this coming year in their one staff, one book study.
So I knew you were going to ask this question. So I'm prepared with my books next to me. So I don't normally just travel with these books and carry them around like it looks like.
What's in your Kindle?
But
you're an avid reader.
There you go. Well, see, I don't get to read as much as I would like to during the school year. And I hate that. And I'm working on doing better at that. I started this summer reading educational books to kind of further my own learning. And then I realized that for me, I'm such a non-researcher and such a more, I just like getting lost in worlds. So I was like, I went to a Scholastic Reading Summit in San Jose, California. And there's one coming up in San Antonio next week. But anyway, and so I went to that.
I wish I could be there.
And I bought like 30 books. My wife chewed me out, but I bought like 30 books. And then I just started reading them. I couldn't put them down. I was like, this is the kind of reading stuff I love. I just love to read stories. Which is why we wrote Kids Deserve It in a story format. But anyway, one book that I read that it's either just came out or it's still in pre-release. I think it just came out. And it is by Jewel Parker Rhodes, and it's called Towers Falling. Oh my gosh. So I read this on an airplane.
I saw you post that
Yeah,
on
I read
Twitter.
it on an airplane and it was a bad idea because I cried like the whole way through this book. Jewel Parker Rhodes has written several
Oh,
books,
no.
one called Sugar, which is on my next one to read on my list. And she wrote another one called Ninth Ward. She's an African-American female with a great backstory, but she writes her books from the perspective of African-American kids. And so when she wrote Ninth Ward, it was about Hurricane Katrina and when the hurricane hit and this little girl that lived in the Ninth Ward and what happened. And it was a really powerful story. But I read this one first, and of course it's about 9/11. But the perspective that this takes and the interesting avenue from this 5th grade girl's perspective who is living in a homeless shelter with her family and starts a new school and then learns about 9/11 through a history lesson they're doing and some history that exists within her own family. It was just, oh my gosh, it's making me tear up now because it was such a good book. And I read it like in an hour and a half or 2 hours, but I know for sure I'm already going to get copies for my 5th grade teachers because I think this is a story that our 5th graders need to hear. And I want to get like 9th Ward for our 4th grade students. But that one was really, really powerful. And then I had to read a book by Catherine Applegate, who used to go by K.A. Applegate because she was the author of Animorphs, the book series, which is actually the book series that got me hooked on reading. I never was a reader until I got into the Animorphs, and I still have every single Animorphs book ever released. They're all on my bookshelf. I don't let anybody touch them because they're all the original copies, and there's a lot of memories in there. But now she has a newer book out called Crenshaw. And I started reading it, and it was a little different at first. I was like, where is this going? This is so weird because it's about a boy and his imaginary friend, a giant cat named Crenshaw. But by the end, I mean, even that book had me tearing up. It was such a good book. And the book I'm reading now, because I'm trying to find a lot more books about diversity, books about different backgrounds, overcoming things like that, because I really want to use them for instructional purposes with my students. And it's a book called Code Talker, and it's by Joseph Bruchak, I don't know how you say it, but it's called Code Talker, and it's about the Navajo Indians and how we use them as code talkers right after Pearl Harbor, and it's from the perspective of one of the code talkers, and just the history that's based in here. It's just such an interesting book. I'm not done with it yet. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, but I really, really, really am liking it. And it's funny that I talk about the diversity and trying to find books like that because that's actually our Kids Deserve It challenge that's going to be released tomorrow for this week. So,
oh, that's great.
That's awesome. I love all of your book recommendations.
Thank you.
It makes me want to go straight to the bookstore, straight to
it's
Amazon.
Dangerous
actually,
because
which is
I went
to
to Barnes and Noble like last week with my wife and my mom, and I was like, "Oh, look, Mom, I got to show you this Crenshaw book." And there was another one I was showing her. And then she was like, "Oh, did you see this table? Have you seen these things?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, no." Oh, and then I was like, "But I don't buy at Barnes and Noble because they're expensive." So I just got on my phone right there and filled up my Amazon cart and then pressed buy. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So when I was trying to find these books, I was like, "Liz, where did I put those books I read?" And she was like, "They're in a pile in the office with the other 35 books that you bought." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I have a lot of books to read over the next couple of weeks."
You're like, they're my friends.
I don't think we have too many books, though. I really don't. We have so much.
And I love being a principal who has. I have probably about 200 books in my office, and they're all kids' books because my office runs like a library where any of the kids can come in and check them out, and then we talk about them. And so I love doing that. But my 2 favorite books that I want to recommend to everybody that I've already read, one, I'm sure you've all heard of it, is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. I don't know how to say her name. Any of y'all do? No.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know the book you mean, but
it is absolutely amazing. I had Brent Clarkson read it, and he texted me. He was like, "Oh my gosh, why did you tell me I was going to cry?" I was like, "I told you were going to cry. I told you that book." But the one book that has made me cry the most is a book called Because of Mr. Terupt, Terupt. I'll type it in the chat too. That book was amazing. I love it. One of my favorite books ever besides The Giver. And so I definitely recommend. Yeah, Brent, sorry, I had to tell him you shed a tear. But I already told Brent because he's reading Because of Mr. Terupt next. I was like, Brent, when you read that one, you're definitely going to cry. So get ready because that book was amazing. So
Well, I feel like I have all these new book suggestions here. In the 9th ward for my 4th graders, I jotted that down too because I'm like, oh, that'd be great for my class.
Yeah.
So awesome.
And those books that Jewel Parker Rhodes writes are very easy to read, and they're written kind of like the kids that you would expect those kids to talk. And so it was a very quick, very easy read, very easy to understand. I just know my students will love it.
Awesome. Well, I think that there's going to be some books flying off the shelf here pretty soon at Amazon, thanks to LeadUpTeach and you, Todd. So I hope you've got some kind of like kickback system from the authors.
I wish. Actually, though, it's funny because, I always tell people to tweet out stuff whenever you're reading stuff. And so Jewel Parker Rhodes was actually the closing keynote at the San Jose Scholastic Reading Summit. And so that's why I got her books there and everything. And then I tweeted out that I was reading it, and she sent me an email, and she just sent 12 books to my school to give out to 12 kids, and then sent me an extra copy of Towers Falling. So I passed it on to another teacher friend of mine, and said, read this book, and when you're done, pass it on to somebody else because it came from Jewel. So it was kind of cool that it's like the author valued my sharing her book, that she sent some copies for our kids. So it was pretty neat.
Well, that's wonderful.
See, it's the power of being connected, having those experiences, and what it brings back to your kids. Like that would have never happened if you hadn't have shared out how much you loved her writing. Right. How that happens. So Todd, you had mentioned something earlier about you wish you could go back. I think you had said, and say something to your past administrators. One of our questions that we wanted to ask you is, lots of people like to ask, what advice would you give to your past self? But I recently read a blog post giving some advice for their future self. So in that spirit, what advice do you have for your future you?
I think for me, the best advice I can give myself is to enjoy the moment while it's happening more. Sometimes I'm so focused on where I need to be and what's coming up and what I need to fix and what I need to make better and what I'm excited about, that I don't enjoy myself enough in the moment when it happens. So that, and then not being so hard on things that I do and decisions that I make, letting myself enjoy that kind of stuff more.
Yeah, I think that's important too. And so also, Todd, will you share one thing that you would like to have Lead Up teachers be able to walk away with or go out and do to make a difference? What would you share for our audience?
Well, for me, I think about my biggest thing when I work with people is I want them to go and do something that makes them uncomfortable, something that pushes them out of their zone just a little bit, because I feel like we do our most creative things when we're slightly uncomfortable, when it's new, when it's different, when it scares us. I feel like when I make a decision, if it scares me because it's just challenging or I don't know what's coming next, and I feel like, okay, let's do it. I've got that adrenaline. I'm more likely to try to make it happen, because tell me I can't do something and I'm going to work 10 times harder to prove to you that I will make it happen. It's kind of one of those kind of things. And so I guess if I wanted to leave away with one thing, it's that it is do something that scares you, do something that makes you nervous, all in the idea of making things better for kids. I think about especially the kids that I work with and that I service that come from homes that don't get special experiences all the time, or that don't get people around them who remind them of how absolutely amazing they are and the things they bring to the table. And I want my students so badly to know that phrase of "you can change the world" is more than just some silly phrase. It's so true that they have limitless potential to make such a huge impact on our world, that they have to understand that.
That's great. That's a great thing for people to walk away with. And just, I always say learn to try to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
I like that.
Because it's something that it pushes us and it helps us to grow. So, and as we wrap up, Todd, we would love to hear what's coming up in the near future for you.
Oh my goodness. Let's see. Well, we're keep pushing Kids Deserve It. We are gonna start a Kids Deserve It chat here at the end of this month or in early August to kind of coincide with the book. We wanted to give people time to get the book out and read it. I'm loving the summer learning series that we're doing with Kids Deserve It. We have finished 3 weeks. I did week 1. My good friend Adam DeVico did week 2, and then my good friend Brad Gustafson did week 3. Jennifer Lagarde, a library media specialist out of North Carolina, did week 4, which comes out tomorrow. Super pumped about releasing that. I know Adam and I have already started a planning document, just kind of putting out some ideas for a potential sequel to Kids Deserve It. So we're going to kind of be diving into that and seeing if we can get some more ideas riled up for that. But most of all, I'm so excited about going into another year at my campus and continually doing some great things for kids. This last year at Webb Elementary, I was just blown away by the teachers that I get the opportunity to work with and the instructional aides and the cafeteria workers and the custodians. I have never seen a campus come together like ours did this year. And it was such a powerful thing to watch the transformation happen, that now going into another year with that under our belts, I'm just so excited to see what's ahead for us as we continue to try to transform this campus.
That's really exciting. You've got good stuff ahead of you.
And I believe it'll happen with your leadership at the helm and inspiring your teachers, inspiring your students. There's nothing that can stop you and them.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear more about it as the year goes on and just be able to hear your reflections and all of the happenings that take place. So Todd, thank you so much for joining us on LeadUpTeach tonight. And your message truly touches so many lives and resonates with all. And I know our audience has just enjoyed hearing about your personal journey and all that you're doing to make education be outstanding for kids and doing what's best for kids. I also want to give Laura another shout out, Laura Gilchrist on Twitter, for hosting the chat tonight. Yay. And also, of course, to our amazing audience. We are just so thrilled that so many of you could join us on Blab and also on Twitter. So thank you so much. Continue to share out in the hashtag of LeadUpTeach throughout the week and jump in that conversation with Kids Deserve It as well.
And thank you all so much for having me on as well. I really appreciate getting asked. It was. I love you guys and love what y'all are doing with LeadUpTeach. So thank you for having me on here too.
Absolutely.
Lots of love, Todd. And we'll be sharing out as soon as the video recording uploads into Blab. We'll be sharing this out via a YouTube link. And so hopefully we won't run into any technical difficulties, but you'll see it on Twitter when we get it loaded. And looking forward into the future, LeadUpTeach is going to migrate over to Google Hangouts on Air. So you'll be seeing us there, and links will be shared out for those events.
And I also want to just announce the next date and time of our next LeadUpTeach episode. As Heidi mentioned, we'll be switching over to Google. I'd love for you to mark your calendars for anybody who's able to join us. Episode 8 will be airing on Thursday, August 4th at 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern Time. And we look forward to welcoming Aaron Klein and discussing classroom design.
And between now and our next Blab, we encourage you to follow those that you connected with tonight on Blab and tweeting using the LeadUpTeach hashtag. And also we share out a slow chat question on Saturday mornings immediately following LeadUp chat. So that will come out, at 9:30 or right after. And so that's another great way to keep connected with this wonderful PLN.
Absolutely. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you again, Todd.
Yes, thank you, Todd.
No, thank you all so much.